Shondell Zamora.
I'm Daniel Romero.
And I'm Kaizel Brown.
What do you think about cultural assimilation?
I think cultural assimilation is a good thing. Doesn't mean you have to, forget about your own culture. But you can, if you're visiting another country, you could at least learn the language and a little bit of their customs, so you're not disrespecting them.
I personally think it's all a good thing because when you come to the country, it's like if you want to stick to your own ways, it's like you're gonna get discriminated, racist comments and everything like that. I think it's good to bring two cultures together because it's like it forms a good bond and it's like you won't be left out.
I think cultural assimilation is a good thing because, say if you already know this culture and at school they have nothing but this culture, and you feel left out. So that's what I think.
It's like
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alexis Salazar.
I'm Fendi Vasquez.
What do you think about cultural assimilation?
I think cultural assimilation is good, but it's also bad. It's good because you can interact with people that come from the American culture, and you don't feel left out. But it's bad because you start losing your own traditions and you start forgetting about your own culture.
I think cultural assimilation is a bad thing because your culture is basically your identity and it's what you are, and changing your culture is basically changing yourself and being forced to not be who you are.
My name is Mr. Victor Guzman, and I'm an ex-teacher at the AV.
Okay.
I retired in 2016, and I'm substituting for my colleagues now.
I'd like to ask you a few questions.
Please.
What do you think about cultural assimilation?
I believe that cultural assimilation is an important I don't want to call it an idea, but it is important for people that go to a different country, not their own, a country that has a different set of values, a different set of cultural value systems, and it's a good idea to assimilate that culture and the values to be able to perform and to thrive in that particular society. You can only assimilate culturally when you don't belong in that culture. For instance, in my case, I came from El Salvador when I was 15, and I brought with me a set of values from my culture. And I came to a different culture where there was a whole different value system. It was important for me to assimilate those value systems because unless I did that, I wouldn't be able to thrive in this society. So I think it is an important thing to consider, but that can only happen if you are immigrating or emigrating to a culture that is different from yours. Some people consider that to be an abandonment of your very own set of values, but I don't think that's necessarily true. That basically is to go along with the idea that when you're in Rome, you do what the Romans do. So as a Salvadoran, I don't like pupusas. I am serious. So, does that answer the question?
Do you think assimilation is necessary?
I may have just stated that
he
in the answer that it might not be necessary, Daniel, but it is ideal. Okay, so a lot of people, I have a friend who came a little bit after I did, who never was able to assimilate the culture. He doesn't even speak the language after 40 plus years of living in this country. He manages to survive. He owns trucks, he's a truck driver, so he may not need necessarily to be fluent in the language, but if you don't learn the language, you do not learn part of the culture as well, because language is part of the culture. So may not be necessary, but it is ideal.
Were you born in America or no?
I was not. I came from Central America, from El Salvador to be specific, and I came when I was 15.
Did people view you differently once coming to America?
Come again?
Did people view you differently once coming to America?
Back at the time, remember, this is almost 50 years ago. Things were somewhat different because after that wave of immigrants, and I came in 1968, and there have been waves of immigration in the 1970s, in the 1980s, the 1990s, and that has created a different atmosphere as to how they see, this people here see immigrants. So back then, when I first went to San Francisco. San Francisco is a lot more open as far as, the way they accept. They are more tolerant of people from other cultures. So I did not see, Daniel, that much of people didn't see me as different. I mean, they knew I was different, but they wouldn't make it they would make a big deal out of it. Now it's a little bit more, it's more glaring. Somebody comes from outside, doesn't speak the language, people look at them, you know what I'm saying? So I did not feel that.
Did you want to fit into the American ways?
I didn't know much about the American way, so to speak, but it was always something we admire. I came from a very poor, environment. And so to us, and I remember seeing, Americans coming to, particularly Mormons. They went around Central American countries trying to convert people to their religion. So we always admire what we saw in movies. Basically what they portray in movies is what you think America is. Once you come here, then you learn it's a whole different ballgame. But yes, there were some things that I wanted to internalize as my own. Others were not necessarily true. For instance, when it comes to raising my children, I raised my kids the way I would have raised them in El Salvador, not the way kids are raised in America. With a few modifications. I never abused my kids. I never, I didn't believe in physical punishment or any of that crap that Salvadorans do. In that sense, those were American, so to speak, values, because we don't abuse kids. Well, we're not supposed to. But so, yes, in that sense, some of the things that Americans practice, I wanted to internalize as my own.
So the last one is, do you think it's hard to share two cultures in the same household?
It depends if the people in that kind of relationship are open-minded and they tolerate differences, then it wouldn't be a problem. My very own experience is that it may have some problems. There may be some issues, but if the person is open-minded enough, things can be worked out. And so things could work. But I am of the idea that, and I don't consider myself a racist or having prejudices against anything, but I do consider that the best way to perhaps have a kind of, harmony in a relationship is for people to share the same values and the same ideas and the same interests. Different cultures have different values, different interests. So it may work in some cases, but it all depends.
That's it. Thank you.
I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
¿Qué opinas de la asimilación cultural?
Es duro, pero es necesario en este país.
Okay, good.
¿Fue difícil acostumbrarse a las costumbres de americanos?
Sí,
¿Por qué?
porque es duro.
¿Es necesaria la asimilación cultural?
Sí,
La gente te veía diferente al venir a América.
no, porque nunca sentí ningún racismo.
¿Querías encajar en las formas americanas?
Sí,
¿Por qué?
porque me gusta la forma de cómo vive el americano.